made real fortune. One-armed man. I've only gambled like a casino 4 or 5 times. I've never won. It's like, somebody will just give my money. Yes, sir. That's what I did when I went. It's like, right, spend the afternoon. I'll do something I enjoy. If I would have won. That's where everybody gets in trouble.
Oh, okay, that's what I did. Okay, so I'm glad you know that.
No, I just better songs. Everybody says that was with
This is a lot of trouble, so. That's terrible.
So why don't we go ahead and get started? I suspect others will come in as the minutes go by, but Paul's rule is 5 after, or a little bit after 5 after. My name is Joe Mariana. I'm the Tompkins County Administrator. I'm not usually this casual even for evening meetings, but we just came from the County Employees Picnic, and I just came out of the dunk tank at the County Employees Picnic. So if I look a little damp and casual, that's the reason why.
4 times.
What's that?
4 times.
Oh, it is 4 times, not really 4 times. I'm going to try to kick this off with a very brief introduction because so many of you have been either a part of this study or have followed this study since it was commenced many months ago. I think everyone here probably knows that this got its start when the city and the county and the villages of Dryden, Groton, and Cayuga Heights came together and said, why don't we take a look at the way we provide police services in Tompkins County? And at that time, there was state money available to help fund studies like this, and even more money if things lead to implementation. There's money that can help support the cost of implementation. And so with interest combining with resources, we decided it's a good time to take a look at the way we provide police services in Tompkins County without preconceived notions. So those options, and you'll hear tonight the way the study is moving, we said at the very beginning, there's no preconceptions. The options could be, let's just leave well enough alone, all the way to the other end of the spectrum. It could be consolidating every police department into one, with a lot of options in between. And we asked the Center for Governmental Research, based in Rochester, to study that for us, to help us look at those options and understand the costs and the benefits and the pros and the cons of each. CGR has spent the last many months, first of all, just understanding who we are, what we do, how much it costs, how long it takes, all those kinds of things, to develop a foundational piece, a baseline report that they will talk about tonight. And if you went to the first meeting, you heard a glimpse of that even there. But again, we need to know kind of what the situation is currently to know what we can do in the future. And so you'll hear some of that tonight. And then you'll also hear some of the things that they've identified as potential options, different ways of doing police services in the county. And it'll be an interesting session because there are opportunities for interaction in that tonight. I don't want to steal what Paul is going to say, but we do want to gather input, hear what people think about these options before we move into a decision-making mode, which will be within the governing bodies of each of these jurisdictions with, again, a lot of public input. So Paul Bishop has been our point of contact throughout. He's been the chief architect of this study and its author. And I'm going to turn it over to him. I'm also going to serve as your videographer tonight because a lot of the members of the legislature wanted to see this first session, weren't able to be here. So if you see me standing up in the camera, I'm also watching our camcorder tonight as we film this. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul Bishop from CGR.
All right, thank you, Joe. Want to get going. My name is Paul Bishop from Center for Governmental Research. With me tonight are Tanya and Jen from our partners in this study, Highland Planning, who are helping facilitate our public meetings. So I know that as you've been walking in, they've been asking you to check with your cell phones to see if you have one and if you're willing to participate in our Pull Everywhere session.
I think I've missed a few of you as we walked in, so we are going to be doing some live polling as we move through the presentation tonight. There's 3 ways that you can participate. The first is if you want to just write down your comments on a piece of paper. We have some comment cards that you all can use. Second would be if you have a cell phone, you can tie into our polling by texting the word Tanya's Wallen to 250 to the phone number 22333. You could also launch your internet browser and you could just open the website wholeeb.com/TanyasWalnut250. The last way is that we have 5 computers up front, and for those of you who are back here, they're all laptops, so I could bring one to you too if you didn't bring a cell phone or you don't want to use your cell phone. So does anyone need assistance with any of that?
Tanya, do we have to log into polleverywhere.com once we text?
If you're logged in by text, you're good.
So, because I don't see that screen yet.
You won't.
All right, excellent.
By text, you won't. But if you got the message back that you're in, you're in. Anyone need help?
And as we go through, if you have concerns, just flag either Tanya or Jen down, and we'll deal with those as we go through. I just want to give a brief overview of what we're going to do tonight, and I know if you didn't get the text in, you'll still get that response, and we'll have the questions come a little bit later in the presentation. So tonight our plan is to spend about 90 minutes going over both a baseline report that is available at the project website, and then also we'll spend more of the time talking about what the options are that we've identified for law enforcement in Tompkins County. We're staying at a real high level when we talk about the baseline report. The report's about 100 pages long. We did community surveys, we gathered a whole bunch of 911 data, we conducted interviews with about 45 people. So trying to distill all that down into a real short few minutes as we go through the slides is going to be a challenge, but we're going to do our best to do that. We want to spend most of the time talking about what we see as potential options going forward. And we want to get your feedback as we talk about those options. What are things that how do you feel about them? What kind of perspectives do you want your elected leaders to consider going forward? Because they're the ones who ultimately will make a decision. As Joe mentioned, the project overview, we were hired by Tompkins County and the city of Ithaca in December of 2016 to conduct a feasibility study that would explore options for structural alignment and improved efficiency for a subset of the existing law enforcement agencies in Tompkins County and how they serve its residents. We talked about the agencies that are involved: Cayuga Heights, Dryden, Groton, Ithaca, and the Tompkins County Sheriff's Office. We also did interviews with Cornell Police, Ithaca College, and TC3, as well as the New York State Troopers, all of whom have different roles for law enforcement in the community, yet really aren't impacted and weren't full partners in the study. I'm going to refer to the project website several times. This is the way that we can get this information out to you on a regular basis. Every document that we've prepared, as it gets approved by the committee that we've been working with, gets published to this website, so that you can download the full 120-some page report about the baseline operations of the community. You can also pull down the much shorter executive summary. It's only about 15 pages long. So you have the opportunities to gather that information. The options report that we're talking about tonight will get published to the website tomorrow, as well as the presentation, the slides we're sharing tonight. And then ultimately, based on the feedback we get in the meeting tonight, and we have 2 others later this week, we're going to share all that information on the website, and we're going to pull together a final report that will get shared with the community. So a lot of information that we're putting up on the website. It's www.cgr.org/Tompkins, LESS, for Law Enforcement Shared Services. So that's the website that you can go to access this information. So let's talk about the departments that we have that were part of the study. What we have is a real brief snapshot of who they are, what they do. So Cayuga Heights has 7 full-time officers, 9 part-time officers, a budget of about $1.2 million. I say about because we're grabbing benefits, and those of you who are not budget geeks are aware of the fact that villages budget their benefits in a different spot than cities and counties, so we had to use a little bit of an estimate to get that number, but we think we're pretty close to what that full cost is. The population of Cayuga Heights is about 3,800. Now, how many 911 calls happened in that community in the course of a year? It was 1,255 in 2016. So that's the number of calls that occurred, 911 calls, so just over, or right about 4 a day happen in that community. There are index crimes. So index crime is essentially your felonies that occur in a community. They're tracked by the FBI and New York State data, and they have about 39 over their last 5 years on average. So we do a 5-year average when we talk about index crimes, because you can have a lot of variability from one year to the next. Dryden, a little bit smaller police department, also a substantially smaller budget. One of the challenges with Dryden is they're in the midst of a transition. They were a full-time police department until about 2013, 2014. Then they went down to being a part-time police department. They let a few folks go. And then in 2017, they decided to go back to full-time. So as a consequence, our cost points are moving a little bit, their budget is moving a little bit, so our estimation of what their budget is might be a little low, but that's what we have, that's what they put together in their budget this last year. Again, population about 2,000. Notice their call volume is higher, both in raw numbers and then per capita, than Cayuga Heights, so it's a busier place. And when you look at their index crimes, it's actually almost on par with the city of Ithaca with the number of index crimes per population. Then we get into the village of Groton. They have 1 full-time officer. All the rest of their department is staffed by part-timers. They are not a full-time police force. They work about 2/3 of the time. So they work essentially 8 a.m. to midnight is when they have their own officers there. At other times of the day, they're patrolled by the sheriff's office or the New York State Police. As a consequence, their budget is really low. They're also known as kind of a training and screening grounds for full-time officers. Their full-time officer turns over usually about every year to 18 months. They then find another full-time position that pays better. So because of that model, their costs are pretty low. They're comfortable with the quality of policing they get. A lot of their part-time officers work full-time somewhere else or are retired from being full-time somewhere else. The population, a little bit bigger than Dryden. Their 911 volume, a little bit less. And their index crimes are lower than Dryden. And when you look at their rate, it's about 21 per 1,000 residents. City of Ithaca, your largest police department. 69 full-time officers. Budget of about $10.3 million. Population 31,000. Obviously, it's going to be the highest 911 call volume for that population of any municipality. Their index crimes, about 1,204 a year. So when we look at that 911 call volume, we have to remember we're pulling population figures. The people who come to work here every day don't count that population figure. So there's a lot of people who come to work in the city of Ithaca and then go home and are elsewhere. This is the economic and social hub of the community, so it's the expectation, it's not a surprise that the 911 call volume is higher per population than we see in other communities. Although they're not quite as high as it is in Dryden. Dryden was at 71 per 1,000, and the city of Ithaca is about 60 per 1,000, so a little bit lower. And then we have the Tompkins County Sheriff's Office, 40 full-time law enforcement officers that work in the road patrol. This does not count your corrections. It does include the sheriff, though. The budget is just under $6 million when we count the benefits and how they're working. The population they serve is 65,000, so they're serving everyone outside of the city, these 3 villages, and Trumansburg, who chose not to participate in the study, so I don't have their data up here. Their 911 call volume was about 10,000, and their index crime is about 498. Now, we have to include the New York State Troopers, because they have a very active road patrol in Tompkins County. So they cover, they use a closest car concept with the sheriff's office. So when there's a call in Enfield or one of the other outlying towns, it's whichever vehicle is closer, whether it's a sheriff's vehicle or a trooper, are going to be the ones that respond. So they really split this 911 call volume for the county. So we have to look at that together. Still, the county's call volume, if you add these two up, is about 25 911 calls per 1,000. Yes.
There aren't 29 state troopers just for Tompkins County.
Yes, there are.
Yeah.
That is per their sergeant. When I did my interview, when you count, or excuse me, the zone lieutenant, when you count their number of, and this is road patrol, this doesn't even include the investigators they have assigned. He gave me a figure of 29 for 2017, which is an increase over a few years ago.
And they don't patrol other counties, just Tompkins?
Those are ones who are primarily assigned to Tompkins County. Now, they may, if they're on patrol and they need to, be sent out to a neighboring county, they may do that. But these are officers these are troopers that are primarily assigned to Tompkins County. He says he has a minimum of 2 troopers on the road, and he will sometimes have as many as 5. So they are a very active participant. It's just not a show of force here. They are actively involved in responding to 911 calls in the county.
I
Yes.
live in senior housing.
I'm sorry?
I live in senior housing.
Yes.
Over here in my row house, and there is a fair amount of calls to 911 because somebody fell or somebody needs to go to the hospital. How do you separate things like that from crime calls? I don't know what that 911 calls reflect your numbers. Another number.
That's a very good question. So these are 911 calls that a law enforcement agency was dispatched to. So law enforcement agencies do sometimes respond to medical calls. And we'll see that actually on the next slide. But the majority of these calls are incidents that are primarily need a law enforcement officer. So the print on this slide is a little bit small for you in the back. I realize that. So that the top 4 or 5, we'll go down from the top. So the top one are accidents. So that's property damage or injury accidents, primarily property damage accidents. Then we get complaints, which might be a civil service, neighbor complaints, noise, traffic, other, assist calls, burglary, larceny, robbery, theft, and alarm calls. So those are our top 5. Medical calls are down here, and law enforcement's responding to about 1,000 medical calls a year. And that's all law enforcement across the whole county. And different agencies handle that differently. And we could dig into that in the report. You could see, for example, in the city of Ithaca, what percentage of calls are medical calls that they respond to. But we'd get really down into a rabbit hole tonight if we did that. We'd be here till about 11. So I want to try and stay high level. Yes, ma'am?
Does accident, this first one, include motor vehicle accident?
So those are primarily motor vehicle accidents, yes. Motor vehicle accidents, so they get categorized into 2 types, property damage or when a person is injured. Property damage accounts for 8 to 9 out of 10 of the 911 calls. So property damage is a fender bender, no one needs to go to the hospital. Injury accident is something that we need to go to the hospital for. So it's about a 90-10 split if I remember right.
What does assist mean?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Every agency categorizes different things as assist. And that's somewhat one of those miscellaneous calls. The majority of these assist calls are actually in the city of Ithaca. And they can be things as simple as helping someone with a locked vehicle or just a minor incident that doesn't fall into any other category. Is what ends up as assist.
It was a big increase.
Yeah, there was a big increase, and I'm not entirely sure what that is. Some of them I have the answers for, that one I don't. Yes?
So is this like when there's an accident and 4 different agencies respond? Is that like 1 call or is that 4?
So that is, in this database, this chart right here, that is 1 incident. So 4 officers on 1 response or 1 location, it counts as 1 incident here. If you go through our baseline report, we actually have some where we talk about the number of officers on the scene, and that gets up a little bit higher. So the numbers are, we always try and clarify what source is that we're going through.
Paul, what about more than one officer, but from different agencies? Would that show as
No, again, this is single incident, so this is, so if there's an incident, say, in Cuba Heights, and it's, they have one officer on patrol at the time, and it's a higher risk incident, they want backup, and the backup is coming from the sheriff's office, both sheriff and Cuba Heights would have one call, but in this database I have here, that shows up as just one event. This was fun as we were doing our data management because of that, but we were able to sort that out because there's a unique index in the 911 center allowed us to do that. All right, so this mess of a map are the calls for violent incidents that occurred in 2016 in Tompkins County. And we break it down, we have different categories here: assault, fight, harassment, menacing, rape, and prowling are one symbol. Sex abuse is another, weapons related is a third. This is a very busy map. The scale, you can see how much happened right here in the city. It's really hard to pick out what's going on in this neighborhood versus that neighborhood. I understand that, and I have a workaround for you. On our website, they gave you the URL for earlier, cgr.org/Tompkins, LESS. There's a tab for documents. When you open up that tab for documents, you'll see a mapping application. Inside that mapping application, you can break it down. You can zoom in so we get down to the city level, zoom out a little bit so it's city and town of Ithaca, and then zoom out so we have each of the villages as well. So we're playing with the computer tonight, and we weren't able to bring that screen up for you here. But if you have an interest, and we don't have it just for violent crimes, we have it for accidents, domestic incidents, and several other categories. And you can go to that website, you can dig into it, and you can look and see what's going on in your neighborhood. And this is for 2016. So I encourage you to do that. It just gives you an idea of what's going on and where. And it is, however, the other caveat, we could have gone, if they went to that address several times for the same type of incident. So say there's a weapons related call at the same location 4 times in a year, it's just going to show up as one dot. But that's just gives you an idea of the pattern of crime. And it's very interesting, you know, we run into things, for example, domestic violence. There's a perception that it's a problem in dense population, and it's not. It's spread throughout the whole county. When you look at accidents, I don't think anyone will be surprised as to what roads you have more accidents on than others. And it follows the pattern of traffic volume. All right. So this is the last slide where I'm kind of talking about the baseline activity, what's going on in the community. And this is who responded where in the county. So going across the top are all of the agencies that are dispatched by 911 that are public agencies. So Cornell, well, not all, I discounted the Park Police and the DEC, but this is the majority of them. So we have Cuba Heights, Dryden Police, Groton, IPD, state troopers going across. Overall, there's not a big surprise here. Because going down are the communities that they responded to. A couple of things that caught my attention when I took a look at this. So the Dryden Police Department at the time was operating about 80% of the time, or about 90% of the hours. They weren't at 100%, and they handled 77% of the calls in the village. So there was a little bit there were some calls after hours where their volume was pretty high. Now, the Dryden Police Department responds outside of the village pretty regularly. Almost once a day, they're going out into the town of Dryden, 268 times. So 20 times a month, they're responding into the town of Dryden. Now, the residents of the town of Dryden pay nothing for that service. The village is funding it, and the village is providing the service free of charge to the town. Now, what's happening is they're going out there, they're responding, they're either backing up a sheriff or they're responding to a call because the sheriffs are coming or the troopers are coming from far away, and they're providing an initial response until the sheriffs or the troopers get there and then take over the call. But it's happening pretty regularly. And let's see, Groton Police, so I told you they only operate 2/3 of the time, 16 hours a day. So the Groton Police Department handles 85% of the 911 calls that happen in their community, even though they're on duty 2/3 of the time. So they're picking that right. They're saying we're only going to be in business during these really busy times, or the busiest times for us, and those after hours times get handled by the sheriffs and the troopers. So again, all this information that I'm sharing with you tonight, we have a little bit more detail, a little bit more description in the report, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of how where we started from when we started talking about this, about our options. Okay. In the early stage of this report, we did a survey of the community. And we were pretty pleased with the response. We had almost 1,000 respondents from the community. Those of you who are statistics majors or might even work in that field, you'll want to know that this was not a true valid survey. It wasn't representative of the communities, it wasn't scientifically designed, it was purely a convenience survey. But we were happy with the number of responses we got. We're able to draw, I think, a few inferences about how people feel in the community about what they're getting. So one of the questions we asked is, how satisfied are you with current law enforcement services being provided to you at home, so the community where you live? In general, people are pretty happy with what they're getting, right? If we look at our percentages, we're over 50% are satisfied or very satisfied with the services they get in their community. There are a couple of outliers here. When we look at Cuga Heights, we get a response rate of 76% are very satisfied. The highest by far of any community, people who are very satisfied. That was 33 responses, so that wasn't 4 guys stuffed in the ballot box. That was out of their community, 33 people answered the survey, and that's what they told us. And then, I was just a little surprised, City of Ithaca, the number of neutrals, and the same in Dryden and outside the towns and the villages in the city and the county, we were a quarter to 30% were neutral, where they don't have a positive, very satisfied or unsatisfied. But in general, people are happy. We don't have a lot of unsatisfieds in this community with what they're getting for law enforcement. And people feel pretty safe, which was another finding. So we had just shy of 900 people answered this question, 870, and 30 or 25% said very safe, and nearly 50% said safe. So again, we're pushing 70% are saying that they feel safe or very safe in their community. The number of unsafe is below 5%. Or excuse me, very unsafe was below 5%, the number of unsafe was just under 10%. So people are feeling, in general, safe in their community.
Now, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Who do you send the surveys to?
Trying to remember, rewind back to our methodology. So we published, this was primarily an online survey, and we shared it through several Facebook pages, websites of each of the communities that were involved. We had notices of it at several libraries in the community. I'm trying to remember our other methods.
A press release.
There was a press release.
So that means that people who are not very computer oriented.
We did have paper copies available at.
Rich, so.
You're right.
It's a little sided, isn't it?
It is. And I acknowledge that very clearly right at the start, that it's not, our methodology had flaws in it, and we knew that from the beginning, and we knew that as we were in discussions with the city and the county about what we could do. But to do a scientifically valid survey where we're calling people or we're accessing other ways, making sure we're representative, was going to drive the cost up dramatically. So we thought that this was a good alternative. So, and as a person who's trying to work with this community to consider change, this was a response that pleased me. Because we asked we worded it, what is your support for potential restructuring of law enforcement in the community? And we had some who were unsupportive, meaning that they're probably very happy with what they have. We had some who were very supportive, and we had neutrals. We run this across, you see that bar graph, we don't have a weight one way or the other. I view that as we have some people who are open-minded and can consider that, okay, maybe there is something we can do that's better, maybe there is something we can do to change what's going on in this community and how we provide law enforcement, so they're ripe for the discussion at least. And that's where we begin to transition here to start talking about the options.
Excuse me, do you have this slide and the slide before, or the data before, by municipality?
I have some of it broken down by municipality. In the full report, I don't remember all of them that I broke down by municipality. We clearly have the raw data, so if you have a specific question that you want to ask, I'm sure we can dig into it and take a look at it. We try to break it up into the ones that we felt were going to be most relevant, but we can obviously, we have the raw data to dig another layer if there's a specific question.
Sorry, we're data geeks here. That's what
No, I
I'm
understand
asking
that.
these questions. So the other complication of that is when you say, where do you live? I say Ithaca.
Yeah.
So that could be the city of Ithaca,
No.
the town of Ithaca,
No.
the town of Dryden, the town of Enfield, the town of Ulysses.
Not if
or
you used the
Dan-
survey properly. It would have specified city of Ithaca, town of Ithaca, village of Dryden, town of Dryden, village of Groton, etc.
Okay, so many people know, okay.
Assuming people know, which is a challenge. And we did that, we had a focus group where we had a couple of city, they're not city council in Ithaca, it's common council members. And they were telling us that they have people who come to their meetings, think they're city of Ithaca residents, and they say, oh, what's your address? Oh, no, I'm sorry, you actually live in the town. They're coming to their community
But if
meetings.
you ask for municipality, that helps.
Yeah, so we asked for municipality, we had all the options. Yes?
You might be getting to this next, but I'm curious about greater detail on the why. So the potential reason for those who are very unsupportive may be substantially different than the reason for those who are supportive. Like if you assessed how well they understood the situation, or how engaged they are, or whether they're supportive of the law enforcement in general, all of those would greatly impact the different ends of the spectrum differently.
Yes.
Did you
No.
capture any of that?
So we do have, how we attempted to capture that, and what we do have and we will share and we have some summary of, is we had some open text responses. So we have, as part of the report package, we have all of the open text responses that we received by question.
And what percentage of people gave open-ended comment responses rather than just answering?
So how we had the survey set up was, for several of the questions, it was, for this one in particular, I know we had this, I'm fairly certain we had this question,